Hi there. This is Mary Louise from Manitoba, the center of Canada. And I'm very happy to add a story to the celebration for the 40th anniversary of Tales Alberta, or now Storytelling Alberta. I have many fond memories of traveling to Edmonton to the Storytelling Festival. And even though it's a snowy day here in Manitoba, as I record this story, I remember the warmth of the summer in Edmonton and the warmth of the people and how well organized everything was. And no matter whether I was giving a concert or a workshop, I would happily go back whenever they asked me. Now, the story I want to tell you today is one of my favorites because it actually was inspired by a little adventure that my brother and I had when we were children. And we spent a lot of our summer days playing on the banks of the Red River, which was really just down the street from us where we lived in Winnipeg at that time. So I hope you enjoy this story and all the other ones in this celebration. Once there was a boy and a girl, a brother and a sister, and they lived not very far from where the Red River curled its way through the city of Winnipeg. And every summer, they were free to play on the banks of the river. Now, they never went swimming in the river because their mother had told them it was not safe. And for some strange reason, they obeyed. Children often don't, you know. Now, one particular summer, they were playing on the banks of the Red River, and I have to tell you, they knew all the pathways through the river bottom forest and all the places where the river undercut its banks because they were just clay and made almost like caves that you could climb inside. And on this particular day, one of those prairie rainstorms started. The kind where you get out here where it's not a gentle rain, it's thick, cold, wet, huge drops of rain. And, well, within minutes you're soaked. And there's thunder and there's lightning, and they don't last very long. And the children thought, well, we'll never get home in time, we'll be dripping wet. Oh, said the brother, let's go and shelter in the cave that's just down over there and wait till the rain stops. And the sister thought, well, that's a great idea. And off they went. And they huddled in the cave right at the edge of the water. And they watched the drops come down, and so heavy that they bounced right back up off the water. And they heard the thunder and they saw the lightning, and they were mesmerized for quite a while. But then they got tired of watching the storm. And they started to look all around inside the cave. They were used to the dimness now, and they could see things with their eyes. And they saw snails and all sorts of different spiders and all sorts of insects and slugs, worms. Oh, and all the tree roots, tiny ones like hairs and thicker roots, all coming out from the edges of the cave. And then there was the soil, all kind of clayey and easy to dig around with your hands. Well, the brother pulled on one root and it came right out. And he said, wow, that's strange. And the sisters looked at the root and she said, well, that's a bone. That's not a root. Well, where there's one bone, there must be more. And they dug with their hands. The storm was forgotten at this point. The rain could come, they wouldn't care. They were digging to see how many bones they could find. And they found a pile of bones, and they laid them on the floor of the cave and tried to figure out what kind of creature were those bones from. They didn't know. And so they got an idea like children do. Let's put a spell on the bones. Let's sing a chant over it and see what happens. And they started singing. Bones, bones, who are you? Show us who you are. Bones, bones, who are you? Show us who you are. Well, they got so engrossed in singing, well, they kind of forgot about the bones, and they didn't notice at first that the bones started to move and shape and set itself and arrange itself into a creature. It was a woman, an old woman with long white hair all going down her back, gray white. Oh, she said, it's good to be back together again. Thank you, children. Well, strangely enough, they weren't afraid. Who are you? They asked her. Why, I'm just an old woman, and I've been around since the world began. Oh, well, you must know lots of stories. Could you tell us a story? Yes, she said, and she clinked herself into a sort of seating position on the floor of the cave, and the two children sat down, ready to hear a story. And she told them several stories of when the world was young and how all the creatures could talk to each other. And even the rocks spoke, even the trees. And human beings could talk to the stars, and they could hear the moon. And the children were as if they were in a trance, listening to her voice and imagining a world like that, where everyone understood everybody else. She told them a story about a young girl, and she had been playing on the banks of the river, and a rainstorm came up, and when she sheltered in the little overhang, like those children were right now, there's something gleaming in the darkness. And she couldn't figure out what it was. She went over and tried to pick it up, and it was barely weighed more than a breath. She could almost see her hands through it. It was so gossamer thin, but it had all the colors of the rainbow. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. And she thought to herself, shall I take it home and show my parents and the rest of the people in my village? Maybe, but I'm just going to leave it here for a while, and it'll be my secret. And so she left it in that river bottom cave. And all that summer she came and visited and gazed upon its beauty and wondered where it came from and what could possibly be done with it. Should she just leave it there? And she'd pretty much decided to just leave it there. And then winter came. Now, out here on the prairies and at the edge of the boreal forest where we live, winter is sometimes very mild and sometimes extremely harsh and cold and long. And this particular winter was harsh and cold and long and full of snow. And it seemed very worrisome to all the people because, well, how would they survive? And they would watch the sun and its movement through the sky because they knew what it looked like when it was a summer sun and what it looked like when it was a winter sun. And they knew it was moving across the sky, but on those really cold days, it seemed to just stand still. And they worried that the sun was frozen in the sky. What could they do? Now that's when the girl had an idea about her beautiful treasure that she was keeping secret in the cave. She ran to the cave in the snow, and she picked it up in her hands, and she went out and up onto the riverbank, and she tossed that rainbow-colored, beautiful piece of gossamer material into the sky, and it floated up, up, up high into the sky, and it surrounded the sun like a rainbow surrounding the sun. And the sun looked around and saw this beautiful rainbow, and the sun smiled and shone down on the earth. Now, the people, when they looked up, they couldn't really tell that it was a rainbow. It looked like two lights on either side of the sun, smaller than the sun. And if they looked really hard, they could see that the colors encircled the sun, but because there was these two lights there, they called it the sundogs. And the girls' job every year, when there was a cold winter, was to go back into that cave, find that piece of gossamer, and throw it up to the sun in the sky. Now, the children said, "Tell us some more stories," but Bone Woman said, "I have to go. But if you come back to the cave and you find my bones and you put them together again, I will come and tell you more stories of when the world was young."